Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 29, and today I'm here with Amethyst Joy talking about self-care. Amethyst has 3 littles that she co-creates with and writes about her healing journey, parenting, and generally being a person in a body under the handle Healed Mother. She also helps people reparent themselves while parenting the souls who choose them as a trained intuitive energy reader and healer. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. If you are enjoying the Sage Family Podcast, then click those stars on your podcast app or head on over to iTunes and leave a review. This is a quick and easy way to support the show using the currency of feedback. We currently have a 5 out of 5 star rating with 98 reviews, and I am so touched by each and every one. Whiskey Road Homestead says this podcast is keeping to her soul. The Sage Family Podcast is such a breath of fresh air in my family. It takes the simple, basic principles of what it means to be a caring and collaborating parent and brings them in a fresh light. Every podcast reminds me of how we as a culture can raise strong, caring little people who are unique in their own way. Thank you so much, Whiskey River Homestead, for your thoughtful words. They are felt, they are appreciated, as are all of the reviews that you guys leave on iTunes. For this adventure of the week, we attended a bat biology and box building seminar at a local nature preserve with friends. At one point during the presentation, they asked if we thought vampire bats sucked blood. Wes's hand shot up. Not exactly, he explained. They land near a sleeping farm animal, jump onto their backs, use their heat sensors to find a vein, and puncture holes with their fangs. But their saliva is an anticoagulant that numbs and keeps the blood flowing. Then they lick the blood and it flows down these channels in their special tongues. Wow, the naturalist giving the presentation responded, "Yes. Do you know what guano is?" "It's bat poop," he excitedly answered. "And did you know that during the war, people mined bat poop and used it in explosives?" "Wow," she said again. "How do you know all that?" He responded by explaining natural homeschooling and the web of understanding in 7-year-old terms. "I found a book in the book box on our street all about bats, and we read it lots of times. Then we explored the caves in Texas and saw the bats and the guano, and the people there told me the stories about what happened there. And I read more books and watched videos and visited bats, all different places." Then we made the actual bat boxes with friends, which is a good example of learning by doing. What perches the structure of their feet require, the size and shape of their bodies, how many will roost together, reproduction, predators, habitat, diet, conservation, all learned through their hands with movement and action. I actually learned well through reading and listening, but I am a weird writer in the minority, despite school teaching all other types of learners that they are deficient. Shout out to all the brilliant humans who learn by doing, and may we all honor that natural and intelligent way of being. If you want to see photos and videos of this adventure, then head on over to Sage Parenting on Instagram and follow along. Today, Amethyst Joy is joining me to share a conversation on self-care. Her quotes started popping up on my social media and really resonated with me. So, of course, because I like to surround myself with aware, wise, loving, bold, radical woman, I had to track her down and become her new friend. Now, tell us your story, Amethyst. Who are you?
Oh my gosh. I am a mother of 3, and my journey really started with figuring out who I was at that point. I felt like my first demanded something of me that I did not have yet. And so I spent the first year of their life trying to figure out like what they needed of me. And so that really sparked my work, and is really the lifeblood of what I do. Before that, my life was filled with a lot of trauma, guilt, and shame. And it's taken about 7 years for me to be, who I am today, which is worlds different from who my trauma told me I should be.
Oh man, I love that. And we are definitely going to talk about trauma, because how can we not in an episode about self-care?
Exactly.
So we want to talk about doing the work of healing from your trauma for yourself and so your children don't inherit it. Bravely digging underneath all the feelings and experiences that feel hard to shine a light on, all those underlying issues that are poisoning your present so you can see them for what they are, metabolize them, and stop the intergenerational transmission of those traumas. What advice do you have for listeners out there trying to parent their children from a place of love and respect who are being undermined by their past traumas?
That's an excellent question. Really the key is to acknowledge that you are living with trauma, and that acknowledgement can be difficult to understand that you could be living a different life than the one that you're currently living due to being in survival mode, essentially. Yeah. Survival mode is that narrow tunnel vision of panic that you can't quite get out of. It's the feeling of drowning, etc. And so the pipeline to healing is gratitude. And what I mean by that is the first step towards any sort of success is not guilt or shame because you are this way. So getting past those feelings, here's the life that's in front of you. You don't need to kind of feel shameful for how you should be living, quote unquote. But accepting that life looks how it looks right now. And so the next step to get into that authentic shift is gratitude. Gratitude for all of the people that you have had to be to get you to where you are today. And forgiving yourself for the choices that you had to make while you were in survival mode is a huge thing to kind of face and confront. And so just being gracious with yourself is important, like treating the way that you treat your kids when you're feeling the most gracious and loving to your children. Because healing trauma is a difficult path, often including feelings that we've been avoiding for years. And so digging through that is painful. But trauma is finite, which is the excellent. It feels all-encompassing when you're in it. But once you can find your path and your tools and find your own voice, there is true light there.
Gratitude for who you had to be when you were present in the trauma while it was happening. Gosh, that's a gem. As in the therapy world, we often talk about changing your relationship with the different parts of yourself that have served you in various ways in different seasons of your life. I love that that's a part of the story of healing from trauma for you.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is. And knowing that those parts of you can be sent to bed. You don't have to continue making the choices with the toxic coping mechanisms that we often hide our trauma with. And we can thank her or them and, put them to rest and make different choices.
Yeah, thank you for serving me in this way and in this time. And you're not needed right now. You're not
Absolutely.
Needed today.
and most of the time that version of ourselves is exhausted. And so we need to be excited to lay down and pass the torch to a healthier version of you.
Yes. And also there's only so much room within you. So if, say, your warrior has been driving for a significant portion of your life as you tell the warrior they can hang out in the break room,
Yeah.
that opens up more space for you to grow in other ways and for you to nurture these other parts of yourselves and empower these other parts of yourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about expectations. I have said before on this podcast that your expectations are the problem, not your child. Now I'm going to say your expectations are the problem, not you. You are enough. As mothers, we can often feel like failures, but we are not all deficient. We're human. It's the expectations of society, ourselves, sometimes even our children, that can trick us into feeling this way. If you're not sure if this is hanging you up, answer this question and see how much it aligns with reality. What is a good mother? And remember, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So how have you seen expectations undermine a sense of peace and success?
Oh, so many ways. So with expectations, motherhood is not a one-size-fits-all role that we have to cram ourselves into. I strongly believe that our children choose us, and so all that we need to do, is become the most authentic version of ourselves, and that's the parent that your child needs. It's not, you in the kitchen baking when you hate baking. Like, you don't have to do all of those things to kind of meet up to an imaginary version of what the perfect mom is. And expectations are tricky because it brings your mind to a place that isn't real. Instead of living in the reality of how the day is looking, you're constantly not present. And so it takes you away from the life that's in front of you in order to create like a fake, life, essentially. That is where the shame cycle comes in, because if you have an expectation that wasn't realistic to begin with, it didn't come to fruition, then that guilt talk comes in. You're like, oh gosh, I didn't get that done. I was supposed to get that done. When really, the kids had a great day. Like, it's okay.
The shame spiral.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So, everybody out there listening, we want you to really think about those inappropriate expectations you're having for yourself. That idea of the perfect mother that you have in your head, or the perfect day as a mother with your children that you might wake up with. Reevaluate all of that, because those inappropriate expectations or inhuman expectations are really going to set you and your children up for failure. And we want you guys to get set up for success. So what are more realistic expectations based on who you actually are, and who your children actually are, as opposed to this artificial, idealized version of a mother and a child?
Yes. Life is more than Instagram squares.
What? I live for the square. No, I'm kidding.
Me too, but...
Integration. So integration is one of my battle cries. There is a pervasive false dichotomy that exists in the mothering narrative, where women believe that they must choose between their children's needs and their own. But this is a myth. They are not mutually exclusive. I advocate for, and I do a lot of specific work around this in my parenting coaching with mamas, holding the space for your needs too. There's this quote I love from El Arnos that says something like, self-care doesn't mean me first, it means me too. And Pamela Rickia talks about this also in her book, The Unschooling Journey. Can you talk to us about how we can meet our needs while in connection with our children?
Absolutely. So one of the main things I talk to my clients about is, and really trauma comes down to worthiness. Not feeling worthy to be present in those moments in parenthood that can be healing for you. And so putting yourself on the list is important. That feeling of deep healing when you're caring for your child's needs in a way that you didn't feel seen as a child, allowing those moments to heal you. So consciously inviting your inner child to the moments where maybe you got yelled at for cutting your hair as a kid, right? If your kid does something similar, instead of reacting in the way that your parents did, you say, hey, it's just hair. You look great. I'm glad you didn't cut yourself. You know what I mean? So using those moments, inviting your inner child to back to that moment where you felt shamed and scared and afraid, inviting them into the healing connection that you're creating with you and your child. And that is a way to kind of go around all of the spiritual busy work, as I like to call it, and kind of go to the core of healing the trauma.
And talk to us about like what that looks like to be meeting your needs while in connection with your children. So, in meeting your needs in connection with your child, that is like the energetic way to do it. That looks like is taking a deep breath, visualizing that moment of trauma and kind of rewriting the story, allowing yourself to self-parent yourself through those moments. And so you're meeting your child's need of feeling seen, heard, and connected, and you're also feeling seen, heard, and connected through self-parenting. And I think one way that is helpful for parents to get to that like energetic plane is to start on the practical plane. Like I find that sometimes when I'm working with families, thinking about starting in that place is too much. And so it can be helpful to start in a very practical way by holding space for your needs, even in terms of like the daily rhythm or like the foods you eat or the places you go or the times that you do things. You can start off in a really practical place, holding space for your needs too. And that can help you sometimes get to the deeper work.
Yeah, exactly. I have 3 children. I have them 24/7. They are my complete loves. And so my partner works a lot. And so it's just us 3. And so I create success in that by doing things that where they're having fun, like even just going to Target and looking in the toy aisle. Like they're playing with all the toys and I'm deep breathing and I'm, reading things on the internet that fill me. And I am just kind of caring for myself, even if it's 5 minutes at a time, is a huge deal in self-care.
Absolutely. Like when taking a bath every night is like a big point of self-care for me. I take a hot bath every night. And even when my little ones were really little, they would like when they were babies, they would be on my chest, or as they got older, I mean, they would be in the bath too, but I would try to hold the space for me to meet that need. Like that's where I would do my meditation or, sort of recenter going into the bedtime routine. And as I got older, it would be as simple as like, as soon as the water is done filling, then you can get in with me, and then as they've gotten older, of course, now they don't really jump into my bathtub anymore, but the point is that you can start from day one incorporating meeting your needs and your kids at the same time.
Yeah, and it will get easier the more you practice because instead of working with such a deficit from going to no self-care and feeling like you're overwhelmed and empty and raw all of the time, you don't have to be working from such a deficit. Then it just becomes maintenance. And so with regular practice of literally 5 minutes of breathing and putting your hand over your heart saying everything's going to be okay, then those words start to become our real life script.
So let's talk about maintenance. Maintaining self-care is all about routine for me. So I design with great intention routines for our days, weeks, years that hold space for all of our needs. Like I have a morning routine blog post that I'll link to in the show notes that's just kind of an example of this. But how do you maintain your self-care?
I think the very first part of maintaining self-care is dismantling the reasons we don't think that we deserve it, right? Because if we thought that we did, it would already be on the list. And so the beliefs that there isn't enough time or money, and kind of dismantling those, because what's true is that self-care doesn't have to be expensive. you can do your breathing or do, 5 minutes just to yourself for calming yourself down or whatever. And you deserve to like reallocate some funds, if
Yes.
the route you want to go. Like there are a lot of limiting beliefs surrounding motherhood, self-care, what we think we deserve, the engine that we think that we should be just running constantly. So all of those grand scale beliefs, it's worth to examine how those affect you in your own life, and how they affect you, especially with maintaining self-care for yourself. So you can be having a really good month, and then you can be like, oh, I should stop spending money on that, blah, blah, blah. But keep doing it.
Yes, I think too there is this piece that it would serve us to focus on of being a bit of a detective and figuring out what the actual underlying needs are, because sometimes we are spending money on things or really fixating on doing things or spending money or spending time or spending energy on things that aren't really meeting the need that we think
Right.
it's needing. And that's for children and for us. Like sometimes if my child really wants something and it's lying in conflict with something that I'm needing at the moment, I run through that filter of what is their actual need right now? Like maybe they want this, but what is the actual need that's lying underneath it? And the same, and how can I meet that need
Right.
in a different way? And
Yeah.
it's the same for us as mothers. Like sometimes we might be fixating on something like more date nights for our marriage, or, I want to spend more trips getting a massage, and I love getting a massage, so I'm not bashing that at all. But I'm just saying maybe that if you are really fixating on that and feeling like you're not succeeding at it, sometimes it can serve you to check in about what that underlying need is that you're trying to meet, and is there a more effective way of meeting it?
Absolutely. Dismantling everything in life, I believe, needs to be hyper tailored to the person. That's why I don't teach a parenting style. I teach that you are the best parent for your child when you know yourself best. And so same with self-care. Your self-care, in order for it to be successful, has to be tailored to your life and your goals. And so if you have, like you were saying, like a membership to the gym and you're hating it, that's not filling you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's this story, I think, in the mainstream modern narrative that for mothers, that self-care is like wine and time alone. And I'm not, again, I don't have a moral stance against alcohol. I don't have any problem with time alone, but I find that often these sort of quips that we often hear thrown at women when they say that they're struggling, like, oh, you just need more date nights, or oh, you just need more time alone, or oh, drink some wine. Like, they aren't necessarily meeting these underlying needs that we're having. So just really bravely looking at what your needs are, and just how you can actually meet those.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the goal is for us to be kind of a foundation for our kids, learning to hold space without holding everything. And so including your kids in your self-care creates success, instead of the kind of belief that your kids drain you. Well, how you relate to them drains you. And so shifting that is creating success in self-care as well.
Yes. And then there's also that like role modeling piece. Like from the beginning, I'm so happy to role model for my children how to be in touch with yourself and aware of what your needs are, and be willing to allocate the resources, like we say, like in time and energy toward, and sometimes money, toward meeting those needs, and how to value your well-being while in connection with other people, and also valuing what they're needing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, mindfulness. I know you've mentioned like deep breathing a few times here, so let's talk about that one. When I utilize mindfulness in my self-care, I think of it as the ability to be connected to the present moment and acknowledge the tension within you without becoming victim to it. Mindfulness creates a non-judgmental space between stimulus and response, or trigger and reaction, or feeling and behavior. Do you find mindfulness helpful, and how so?
Absolutely. I think that observing yourself and your surroundings without judgment is crucial for emotional and overall health. Because the taking in the choices that we're making, the choices that other people are making, and seeing them strictly as information is going to shift how you respond, react, need to sit with, etc. And so that's mindfulness to me, is observing things without needing to have an opinion.
Yes. So when we have an experience, it is very quickly run through a story filter, and we organize it and store it, based on, we assign it meaning based on our view of ourselves in the world and our place in the world. But of course, those stories and those interpretations, those judgments are subjective. So that piece of that piece of mindfulness is carving out, holding that pause between when you have any sort of an experience and and how you respond to it. Because the problem, when you're experiencing problems, the problem is not what happened. The problem is how you respond to it, or the meaning that you assign it. So if you can create a space to just sit with an experience or a feeling without, before you story it, what that does is that pause allows you to write that story with intention.
Absolutely. Yeah. Becoming self-aware changes everything. It changes the way that we exist in the world and the way that we exist in our bodies. So instead of needing to kind of spiral out with writing that script, we can take a pause and make a different choice.
Yes. It's a really, really powerful, dare I say, habit. I think it becomes a habit over time. Yeah. For sure. And I can feel it within myself whenever something happens that causes me to feel a tad off balance. That is a flag, a warning flag for me that says pause, take a minute here, pause. Don't story this, don't interpret it, don't react to it. This one needs a few minutes to breathe through it and get to know it and see it, be open-minded to it. So I think it's important and some people use the language of triggers. If you feel triggered, that is an invitation to hold on to or create that space, that pause, to breathe with it and sit with it and open your mind to other possible interpretations.
Yeah, and asking your feelings questions. Not stopping at, this feels uncomfortable. Okay, why does this feel uncomfortable? And mindfulness in that way can be an X-ray vision into when we need a refill. And so it can happen before we start to work from that deficit. We can catch it before when we.
Yeah, what could this feeling be trying to show me? How is this feeling I'm having trying to help me? How has this been advantageous for me? What could this other person, or what else might this other person's intention have been? Or what other choice might I make in moving forward that's different from how I've chosen to move forward in the past? I mean, that's just totally off the top of my head, but you can come up with a long list of ways that you can challenge that application of the script that you had been running off of that wasn't serving you.
Yes. Yeah. And instead of kind of living in that wound, we can realize that if something hurts when you touch it, there's a wound there. And so instead of just sitting kind of in that injury, we can pull ourselves out of it and have an overview of, okay, now what?
And using the information that we get in those moments of mindfulness to proactively shift the way we are approaching our self-care, kind of on the front end, I think is really valuable and really helpful. Like maybe you find that you are running on empty at like 3:00, like, and everything is starting to trigger you, and it's trying to point out to you that you have exceeded your sociability coping cup. Like,
Right.
Okay, so let's learn from that. Like what this is showing, what this is pointing out to me is that I need to plan out my days in such a way that all of the social aspects of it are not front loaded or don't exceed a certain amount. Or, maybe if my kid is super social, like I will, while they're all playing on the playground, take walks all around the perimeter of the park. Like, so I'm still available for them, but there's not the same pressure of intense social interaction between me and the other parents. Like, I mean, there is a myriad of ways that you can incorporate your self-care into your life with your kids. And sometimes those moments of mindfulness, they can just bring some new clues to how you can more efficiently meet those needs.
Absolutely. Tiny little different decisions can make way for huge life changes.
Yes, get creative. Like really, really bring some creativity to it. And you will find all kinds of solutions that you had not considered before.
Yeah, and once you start to open that door, the quote that's like, the only people who will find magic are those who are looking for it. Kind of the same way, it kind of softens the soil for more good ideas and ways you can feel yourself to come to you.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about boundaries. What role do boundaries play in your self-care?
Oh my gosh, boundaries are huge. So I tandem nursed my first two children, and I was a single mom. And I just felt so touched out. I was like, okay, I know that your needs and my needs are important, but I don't even know like how to conceptualize that. And I realized that I was resenting my children because I didn't have boundaries. This was not their fault. They weren't asking me to give everything that I had all the time. It was kind of my job to establish boundaries, around nursing, instead of just offering it to them whenever they asked for it. We could, read a book or make another choice. And so boundaries with younger kids obviously aren't as rigid, but you can shift focus. And so the boundary doesn't have to look like a hard boundary and then you say, okay, leave me alone. It can be like, okay, what else can I offer that won't be as draining to me? And so that's a boundary with like younger kids. And then as they get older and start to understand like respect for your body, etc., you can say, please don't touch me right now. And then they can say, okay. So boundaries around, like for me, I have a lot of sensory things. Like being in a body is very weird for me. And so I have really sensitive hearing and like my skin feels weird things. And so boundaries for me are a lot of like body stuff. Sound volume, like I usually wear sensory headphones most of the time, because that is what creates longevity in me being able to be with the kids all day. Instead of me being like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, but not meeting that need, I can say, this is what helps me create success in connecting with my kids. And so even boundaries with the self like that is important in self-care.
Yes, so many good examples there. I tandem nursed my youngest too also. And I love, like my husband will often, when he comes home from work, he will put in earplugs because they're not 100%, like he can still hear us and hear the kids, but he has a hard time transitioning from like the silent office to a very loud, rambunctious house.
Yeah.
And it can trigger a migraine for him. So he just knows for like the first, 45 minutes that he's home, I mean, we don't even really notice. Like he puts those in and it helps his brain like adjust to the change in volume. But yeah, like boundaries for your body, which of course in terms of role modeling is essential, because then your children are learning that they own their bodies and that they need to give consent for other people to touch their bodies as well.
Right.
And then boundaries in
conversations.
Yeah. And then boundaries in like relationships with other people too. I think that's a big one for a lot of families, that they struggle with, like boundaries with extended family members, boundaries with friends. Have you had any struggles in your boundary setting with other people?
Early on, when I was making shifts, kind of away, I was raised extremely religious, and so
me too.
To get away from that, you can't take certain people with you on certain journeys. And so my journey included kind of finding an entire new collective. And so early on, it was extremely difficult, because everyone who genuinely wanted what was best for me in their limited point of view had a lot of opinions about where I was going and in life and in general. So yeah, I had a lot of difficulty, a lot of being challenged. But I was so confident that where I was going was correct, that I was able to eventually say, I trust myself, and this is what I know is best for me. And so creating that boundary of you can do whatever you want, but it's not going to be near me, essentially. I was raised by a narcissistic mom, and so that was a pretty clear journey of boundary setting with blood relatives that I had to go on. But ultimately, my health and well-being is what my children need, and obviously what I need for a successful life. And so I get to say what that means to me. And yeah, the end result is a really lovely life that I adore.
Yes, and you have to have boundaries in order to grow into your best self, because like you said, you are the only one who knows the right decision or the right path for you.
Yeah, and we can find our own voice, and that's not, the echo of our abusers. It sound like that, but our own voice is true, it's real, and it doesn't change. And so what I mean by it doesn't change is it's the same frequency. So when we can discover our own voice, that's when we have keys to the answers that we need for all these questions.
Yeah, I think boundaries can be very kind also in relationships, especially with extended family members or people outside of your immediate circle, though, even partners and such too, because they more effectively communicate your needs and expectations for the relationship. So a lot of times people will feel, like a grown child and their parent, for example, will feel like in both directions, like they're failing and they're always upsetting each other and things like that. And it's because really neither side is effectively communicating their needs for that relationship, and boundaries can be a really great tool for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I always say that it's a loving act to release people from their codependent contracts. And that is a huge boundary, to not carry what is not yours for other people. It's not for their highest good. If you're carrying it, they can't heal it and face it. And so boundaries look like healing often.
Yeah, and especially starting off, like we can keep them we can boil them down to be really simple. And again, it helps people to get hooked into this process if you start with things that are really practical. But like, for example, say like I don't wake up before 10 a.m. So don't call me before 10 a.m.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So that it's not like you're calling me and then your feelings are hurt that I'm not answering, and that like going on and on and on and on. Like, So here's a boundary. Don't call me before 10 a.m. because
you don't have to have the resentment cycle, feel like you have to answer the phone, then you do answer the phone, and then you're going against your own boundary. So.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So it's just like a simple example, and it's often like a really simple practical boundaries and simple practical acts of self-care or simple practical moments of mindfulness. They're like gateway self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to make, I mean, you can if that's what feels good to you, but you don't have to make monumental shifts in a day. You can really just make a different decision.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about choice with you. I know you've used that word a couple of times and I love it. I don't want you or your children to be a victim of your life. I want you to become empowered and responsible for your life and your happiness by recognizing your choices. And you have this great quote, fall in love with your choices or make new ones. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so often as parents, we can get caught up in the cycle of we're making the wrong choice. And from there, we can keep making choices, but also feel bad for them, which is the strangest thing to me. So, like, as an example, if you're turning on the TV for your kids so you can get some work done, and then you're feeling bad that the kids are watching TV, you're not really getting a lot of work done. And you're also not being able to fill yourself self-care time. But if you turn on the TV, you made that choice. So fall in love with that choice. Be confident about it. Be proud of it. Mm-hmm. Let your kids watch TV. And then your mind is clear to do what you needed to do in the first place. And so everyone gets filled, and your kids don't have to have this idea that watching TV is shameful and all these things.
Yes.
Everything in balance.
Yes, I love that. I think, like, I hear a lot too, things like, my kid is making me so mad. Right. A whole lot of, like, my kid is making me feel a certain way. But I just want to emphasize, like, no, you are responsible for your emotional state. No one else can make you feel anything. Certainly your child is not responsible for your internal state. You own that. And I know that's kind of harsh to hear, but the reason I really say that is because it's empowering. Like, that means that
the great thing is you're putting your own power back in your body.
Yes.
You're not handing it to your child, your partner, your friend. You're putting it back in your chest. You're taking a breath and you're saying, how can I change this?
Yes, exactly that. Because so much in your universe is a reflection of a million choices that you make. And probably if you are living in an unintentional way, I would say 99% of them are unconscious. But if we can pull those to the conscious level, that I really think, like, that's where you can fall in love with your choices. Like, when you're aware that it's a choice that you're making, then you can either fall in love with it or make a different one. But that's like how we pull it into the conscious plane. And that's where we're empowered. And that's where we get to design a life and relationships and ourselves in a way that feels rewarding and authentic and fulfilling.
Right. I have a quote that says, and it was in that moment that she realized she was right where she put herself. Mm-hmm. And I think that is either terrifying or really empowering. And so kind of making a choice based on that thought process, I think it can be helpful as well.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about tools. If you find that there is a gap between where you are and where you want to be, and you don't have the tool to cross that divide, reach out for a new tool. Like, I have books and classes and coaching, and my degree is in marital and family therapy, so obviously I support that. I'm a big fan of dumping the tools that aren't helpful and are only weighing you down, and adding tools that you need in the present season. So
That's so funny. I wrote almost the exact same thing.
Excellent. So can you share a time when you have reached out for a new tool to help better meet your needs?
So I was in counseling most of my life. And so I thought that was a really great tool for me. It got me past a lot of anxiety. I'm autistic. I have a lot of quirks, and it helped me for a long time. But then I realized that I was kind of just still sitting in my wounds, and I didn't have the language or the tools to go to the next level. Mm. And so that is when I stopped going to counseling, and I instead started working with an energy healer. And that is really where I finally felt home. And so I was able to take what served me from my lifetime of counseling and psychiatric help, but leave the rest. And I think that that's an important element to moving forward, or, any blanket general belief that you come across. You don't have to take everything. You can just take what serves you and leave the rest and move forward.
Yes, 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 yes. And for any time you feel stuck, there is a person or a tool that can help you get to the other side.
Absolutely. And the internet is an amazing place for that. I often say that I Googled myself out of misery, because I was just so sick and tired of not being able to cope with my life, that I literally just started Googling keywords. And then that's kind of where my education essentially started with, oh my gosh, there are people out there that get me. There are tools out there that are different, that I've never heard of before, that really resonate with me.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And, like sometimes people will feel like, well, I went to a therapist and it wasn't helpful. Or I tried, I went to see a chiropractor and the pain's still there. There are a million different tools, services, people, books, websites, whatever, that are available to you, and there is one or many out there that will resonate and be helpful for you. So if you reach out for help and you try one person or one thing and it doesn't feel like a good fit, that doesn't mean that it's hopeless and you are just broken or that help isn't available or doesn't work. It just means that wasn't the right fit for you. So keep going and keep looking and keep reaching out until you find a hand that feels like the right fit.
Yeah, and people can say the same thing in a million different ways, and one will just really resonate with you, like, oh my gosh, how you said that really made it click and make sense.
Yes.
You can even go to a different counselor or a different therapist and get a completely different experience.
Absolutely. And that's why most insurance companies cover 10 first sessions before you have to commit to a therapist, because even insurance companies who do everything they can possibly do to avoid spending money recognize that it's going to take reaching out a bunch of times before you find a good fit.
Yes. Yeah. And instead of kind of getting caught in that discouragement cycle, you can say, the perfect person is out there for me, and kind of trust that, instead of, because it's like buying a house. It's like, yeah, buying a house is stressful, but there's a trillion houses for you. There's one for you. You're going to, it's just not getting caught up in, I'll never find it. This is the worst, all that self-talk.
Right now I am looking for a new physical movement practice. And so I've just been Googling in my area and kind of making lists, idea lists, and just trying things for a month. Most places have a trial period or a special introductory rate. Yeah. And so I will go and I will be all in for that month that I'm trying it. And then I'll see how it feels and see how my body feels and see how my mind feels and, really just try it on. And I'm going to continue doing that until I find something that feels like a good fit for this season of my life. And I feel okay about that. I'm not rushing it, and I'm not feeling like there's nothing out there for me. I'm just trying to be patient with myself and just keep engaging in the process. And I think that's sort of a template that you can apply to so many different areas of self-care.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, seeing it as a process instead of an end goal is also helpful in finding really what works for you. Knowing that, it might be a journey to get you to where you need to be, and not okay, I need to find this and that's the end of it. It's you can have a little movement to that too.
Yes, and that each step along the way, I'm learning new things about myself that I didn't know before. So if I try something and it doesn't feel like a good fit, that wasn't a waste of time or a waste of money or a failure. that was a really valuable experience that gave me more information that I didn't have before.
Yeah, like even if you go through a terrible, breakup, or you're in a relationship with a person and they taught you how to make a really great grilled cheese, you can away from that. You won, you did it.
Anything with cheese is always worth it. I'm just going to say. Okay, let's talk about, so this is something that I actually got a lot of questions about, and I was going to put it as a Q&A, but I got asked this question in so many different iterations, I just sort of merged them all together. So like community, village, tribe, sisterhood. Being encircled by the supportive presence of your people can be an important source of self-care. And I would argue that nurturing those connections is a form of self-care. What does that look like for you?
Oh man, I kind of exist in a very unique way as far as this goes. And one of my main kind of jobs in this lifetime is because I was born in a really tight-knit community. And I quickly realized that I lost my voice in places like that. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I exist, a lot of my power comes from myself because I have labored on getting to know what was best for me. And so my tribe is pretty small. It is my sister and my partner and my kids. And I really just have come to a place where I can meet my own needs, kind of parent myself. And that's for me. And I know that isn't how a lot of people function, and that's totally lovely and great. But yeah, in this lifetime, it was really meant for me to understand that I had power, and to kind of function from that space.
And that you have figured out that is the size of chosen family that feels most nurturing for you is huge. And then part of, like, one of the pieces of your self-care can include nurturing those connections with those members of your chosen family.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just like really big. And so it's like I am able to be a self-propelled universe in that way. And so anyone who kind of comes along my path and can keep up with me in the rate that I shift and change and grow, fantastic. But truthfully, the way that I exist is challenging for a lot of people who haven't yet done that deep self-reflection work.
And so I think it's valuable for everybody to get to know what that circle, what that community, that village, that tribe, that sisterhood, whatever, that chosen family, what that would look like for them, for that force to be nurturing. Because just because you are a member of a group, like you're in the in-group, doesn't necessarily mean that's healthy or that is a source of support.
Yes, definitely.
Or part of your self-care. So It's definitely, again, like we've been talking about with all these, it's about making all of this intentional, like getting to know yourself. And this is really what self-care is about. Like what feels most supportive and nourishing for you in terms of community. And it's okay if it's different than what the mainstream narrative would be.
Yeah, that's going to be written on my headstone.
And it's also worth noting for sure that like there is an evolutionary history that us humans have, us primates, of having, especially in terms of child rearing, of having people around us who can be helpful, like in times of need. And again, what that looks like can vary, but I would say that once I got super intentional with, and really for me it was part of like minimalism, it was part of that piece for me, was intentionally choosing which people I wanted to invest myself in, like, based on which people, like, those connections really add value for my life, and I feel like I can add value for theirs, and then letting go of all the other stuff and all the other communities and people that do not meet that criteria. Then I have enough to nurture those connections that I have intentionally chosen, and I can leave the doors open for those people being in my life without fear or the extra work of having to protect myself and overmanage those relationships.
Yeah, going where you're celebrated, and allowing those connections of celebration is important. You don't have to keep people around just because that they did something really great for you. I believe that relationships have contracts, and sometimes those contracts aren't for life, and they come in to help you with a certain area of your life, and then the contract ends, and it doesn't have to be a really messy breakaway from that. It can, like I said in the beginning, it can be something to have gratitude for. Thank you for everything you did for me. Now I'm needing to move on.
And like we've talked about with everything else in this episode, like being honest and clear in your boundaries, in your relationships, and in communities about what you can offer and what you need from them. I think that is really helpful in creating a culture in your groups or relationships where it is mutually nourishing.
Yeah, everything that we've talked about leads to clarity within the self, which then changes everything.
Yes. All right, let's move into our deep dive. The show notes can be found at sageparenting.com/podcast29, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. So, Amethyst, what are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic of self-care?
Well, of course, my website is full of things, to basically a compilation of things that helped me finally get to myself is what I choose to offer. And I have a lot of free content on my blog. I've been writing for about 7 years. And so just like little tidbits here and there. I have a Patreon, which is just getting started. So that's really exciting. And as far until I can get my book written, I could use a little bit of your scheduling. But I really, really love the book that I recommend to every single one of my clients is Your Energetic Boundaries. It's by Cindy Dale.
Never heard of it.
It changed my entire life. I have so much respect for that piece of literature. I can't even tell you. Yeah, and then
it is officially on the reading list.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's so good. And then anything by Shefali Tsabari, I really admire.
Yeah, The Conscious Parent and The Aware Family.
The Awakened Family
and
Family. Out of Control.
Yes. And if you head over to sageparenting.com, right there on the homepage, you can sign up to receive the 12 secrets to keep calm, cool, and connected. It's a free guide that is all about self-care. So if you had any interest in listening to this podcast episode and are itching for a bit more practical how-tos, then you are definitely going to want to go download that guide for free. Okay, excellent recommendations. Amethyst, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time, and I hope people really let your words soak in and go check out your website and her Instagram. I love following her Instagram where we get to soak in her quotes in little bite-sized snippets on a daily basis. So thank you for putting all that out there. Thank you for being who you are in the world and sharing that with us.
Thank you so much. It's a great day to be alive.